Hi, dear friends. How are you? I imagine many of you, like me, are carrying around very heavy hearts in light of the events of the last few weeks and months that have taken place all over this country. I am praying for all of us, for God to give us the strength to do what is right, for God to give us the courage to stand up and speak out for what we believe in, and that our actions, big and small, would reflect these beliefs, reflect our love for all people. These past few weeks, I've had the honor and privilege of watching and listening to your children, our youth, as they use their social media platforms to educate themselves and others, to demand change and justice. And many have gone out into the protests to show their love and support for the Black community. One of the sentiments that is reflected by many young African Americans is that they are still fighting for what their parents and grandparents fought for 50 years ago. During times when it feels like nothing has changed, I feel like many of us fall back on the basics. What we were taught and currently teach in our homes to the youngest in our midst. We revert to an almost elementary existence, like relearning our ABCs or the rules of a kindergarten classroom. I find it quite fitting then that one of this week's texts is the first creation account from Genesis, a story that most of us learned in the first few years of our lives, just like we learned the Golden Rule. We don't learn rocket science first, or how to theologically interpret that crazy book of Revelations. We start with what our hearts and minds can understand. We start with a love and respect for all people and all of creation. We start with honoring the holiness in all things. I'm just going to read a few verses from this first creation account from my Message interpretation. I'm going to start at verse 26, on the day that God created us. God spoke, "Let us make human beings in our image, make them reflecting our nature, so they can be responsible for the fish in the sea, the birds in the air, the cattle, and yes, earth itself, and every animal that moves on the face of the earth." God created human beings. God created them God-like, reflecting God's nature. God created them male and female. God blessed them. Prosper, reproduce, fill the earth, take charge. Be responsible for the fish in the sea and the birds in the air, for every living thing that moves on the face of the earth. I will be the first to admit that when events like the murders of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and Breonna Taylor continue to happen, I want to bang my head against a wall and cry out, "Don't you get it?" Too often do we forget that God has sown each of our sacredness into the cosmos from the beginning. Dear friends, as you go about your week, I am praying for our eyes, ears, hearts, and minds to be opened to the sacredness that is in all people, and to uphold our God-given responsibility to care for all of creation. I love you. I will see you next week.